Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Now let us look at the successors of Augustus. Now there were 4 emperors that succeeded Augustus. They were Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Okay. Now these were all unworthy emperors. Okay. And the empire withered, the empire declined, and the empire saw misrule. Okay, so the empire was not like how it used to be before during Augustus' reign or before it. Okay, the empire declined more and more, and it saw misrule. It witnessed misrule. Okay, the governance saw misrule. The people were not treated properly. The administrative system, the economic system fell. All right. Now, these 4 were unworthy rulers or successors of Augustus, but there were other worthy rulers as well who were successful in contributing to the expansion or development or the growth of empire. All right, so they were called 5 good emperors, and they were Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Augustus, and Marcus Aurelius. Okay, so these were the 5 good emperors. Alright, now we know that Trajan, he led a campaign to conquer Euphrates, right? But he was unsuccessful. He was interested and looked when merchant ships were sailing from for India, and he wished that he could also take part in that journey. Okay. So now let us look at some of the other Roman emperors. So the first one that we are going to look at is Commodus. Now Commodus was the son of Marcus Aurelius. Okay. Now Commodus was a very cruel and coward emperor. Okay. So with Commodus and his reign, the Roman Empire came to a decline. Alright. Now the imperial frontier or the Roman Empire's frontier in the north ran from Forth to Clyde. Okay, so this was the boundary in the north. In the northeast, the Rhine and Danube River, it provided as a natural frontier. Okay. Both Asia Minor and Egypt were Roman possessions. In South Egypt and Asia Minor in East, they were part of the Roman Empire. Okay. In North Africa, the Romans controlled the coastal territories between Egypt and Atlantic. Okay. With the Sahara as their southern limits. So you can see that even when the Roman Empire suffered from some unsuccessful emperors and some successful emperors, the Roman Empire was a vast empire which had its northern limits in Forth and Clyde, and its northeastern limits in Rhine and Danube, and it controlled Asia Minor, Egypt, North Africa, and the coastal territories between Egypt and Atlantic. Now, what happened after Commodus, right? So, Commodus ruled from 180 and 193 AD, okay? He avoided his duties as the head of the empire and spent most of his time at chariot races and gladiatorial contests. So Commodus we already know he was not a good emperor, right? He did not do his duties. He was not sincere towards his duties, right? So most of the time and all of his time was spent in games, in sports like chariot races, gladiator contests, okay? After his assassination, he was killed in 193 AD, and after his death, he was followed by rulers that were also equally incompetent, that were also equally unworthy. Alright, The Praetorian Guard, a highly trained and well-paid body, we know that Praetorian Guard was the bodyguard of the emperor, which was created by Augustus to protect the security of the capital. Now that guard got out of control because the rulers were incapable, the rulers were unworthy, and the rulers' rule was signified by misrule. Okay, so because of that, the Praetorian Guards also took advantage of the falling empire, and it got out of control. Okay. Now, the Praetorian Guard played an important role. As long as the Praetorian Guard was in close contact or worked together with the emperor, the empire was strong. But without the support of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor would also be no longer in power. Okay, so with the Praetorian Guard falling apart from this relationship, okay, the emperor also now no longer became powerful. Okay, so between 235 to 284 AD, 235 to 284 AD, between this period there were almost 24 emperors, and only one of them died a natural death, and others were killed or assassinated. Okay, Emperor Gallienus consolidated the rise of power of administrators and military commanders by excluding senators from military command. Now, Emperor Gallienus, he got rid of the Senate and the senators, okay, and their command and their control over the military affairs, okay. He now prevented the senators from serving in the army, okay, in order to prevent the control of the empire, okay. So, Emperor Gallienus thought that the Senate was now becoming more and more powerful. It was controlling the military affairs. It was also controlling the empire. So the Senate was removed, and their control over the affairs of the empire as well as the military affairs were also now stopped. Okay. Such a disintegration at the center inevitably weakens the frontier defenses. Outlying provinces were outrun by German tribes in the west and by the revived Persian Empire of the Sasanians in the east. So because of how the emperors were busy dealing with its internal affairs, the conflicts within its empire, the enemies outside of its territory took advantage, like the Germanic tribes, like the Persian Empire in the east. So they took advantage of the falling of the weaknesses of the Roman emperor and hence began to attack. Okay. Now, the decay of the empire in the 3rd century was checked with the advent of the strong and capable emperors Diocletian and Constantine. Okay. Now, although there was a decline and there were unsuccessful and unworthy emperors of the Roman Empire, but in the 3rd century there were 2 capable and worthy emperors which sort of prevented the decline of the empire. And these 2 emperors were Diocletian and Constantine. Alright? Now, they brought lot of changes. They reorganized the army. They introduced new policies in the administration so that they could save the empire from its decline. Okay? So they controlled the prices of commodities. Okay, they also controlled the interest rates and export prohibitions on strategic products such as iron, bronze, weapons, army equipments, and horses. Okay, so these are the new policies, new rules that they brought out. Constantine required every soldier's son to be a soldier. Now, Constantine made a rule that every soldier's son had to be a soldier, had to enlist and be recruited in the army, unless the son was unfit for the service. Alright? Otherwise, the son had to join the army. Okay? And agricultural laborers on the other hand, they were tied to the land on a permanent and hereditary basis. Okay, so the agricultural laborers also, now their children would also be agricultural laborers, and then they would continue to work in the land. Okay. Patronage, these rulers, Constantine and Diocletian, they also extended their patronage to crafts and architecture. All right, so they tried to stop or prevent the decline and focus their strength into the growth and development of the empire. All right. Now let's look at Diocletian and Constantine. Now Diocletian and Constantine, they were the emperors. They were the emperors of the late Roman Empire. Okay. Now the decline of Rome was not of a sudden nature. For 100 years of decline and civil wars, the government succeeded in halting the worst disorders for a period of 50 years. This was largely the achievement of two famous emperors, Diocletian and Constantine. So we have already seen that how in the early part of the empire, by the end of that part, the Roman Empire was already declining. The fall of the Roman Empire was already happening. But it was because of the two famous emperors, Diocletian and Constantine, that decline was halted. It was stopped. It was prevented, at least for a period of 50 years. Okay, they tried to undo that decline and bring some progress, development in the empire. Okay. So these rulers, they made desperate attempts to strengthen the empire, to take it out of the weaknesses of chaos, of disorder. All right. So first thing it had to do was to end the civil wars. So civil wars are wars which are, or battles or fights which are fought within the empire. Okay. So wars and battles are fought with enemies outside of the empire, with the emperor. Right? But civil wars are wars which take place within the territory of the empire, between ministers, between different groups. Okay, so that's the difference between civil war and war. All right. So the first thing that these emperors had to do was to stop the civil war, to prevent it from happening. All right. So these wars would often take place when succession of the throne took place. Every time a ruler died, an emperor died, and a successor had to be brought to take over the throne, then there would be a civil war. Okay, so these kind of wars had to be stopped. So laws were brought by Constantine and Diocletian to stop these kind of civil wars. Okay. Now the government became a full-fledged despotism. Now the ruler, the emperor, became a despot. It became a ruler with absolute and all authority over all administration or everything in the empire. Okay. The emperor now came to be worshipped as God by his subjects, and it set up an army of spies and an army of secret agents which were recruited, which were employed by the emperors to check what was happening in and around the empire. Now Constantine realized that his hold on west provinces, his hold on the western part of the empire was weakening, and the strength of the state rested in its eastern provinces. So Constantine realized that the western part of the empire was weakening, and the entire strength of the empire rested on its eastern part. Okay, so this was realized by the emperor. So therefore he transferred his government to a new capital called Constantinople in east, okay, from Italy. Okay, so in Italy was the capital of Roman Empire. But once it realized the western part was weakening and eastern part was quite strong, so it moved its capital from Italy to Constantinople in the eastern part of the empire. Alright. Now the despotism, the kind of government, how now the emperor had absolute control over everything, that applied to the economic system as well, okay, in the economic activities. Now the government, the central government or the emperor, it regulated every activity of its merchants and traders. Okay, it regulated the price, it regulated everything in the commercial activities by introducing laws. Okay, now people were told by the emperor and its ministers what vocations or what kind of job they could do. Okay, they worked according to what the ruler or what the emperor wanted them. Okay, now, this kind of absolute control over the people, this was quite extreme, and this was seen in Europe 1,500 years later in Nazi Germany, which was led by Hitler. Alright? Now, of course, the measures taken by the two emperors, Diocletian and Constantine, did help in bringing or preventing the civil wars within the empire, and it also helped prevent the economic decline of the empire. Alright, but it did not bring an overall solution. It did not stop the empire from falling apart. Okay, what its newly introduced policies did was it transferred the burden of taxation to the people. Now people were overtaxed. Okay, and in many places, because the people did not have money, the trade activities stopped completely. It came to a standstill, and there was less wealth for the government to tax. People did not have money, so how could government tax, right? Even if the government taxes, people cannot pay the tax. Alright, so such situation was created. Now, another policy which was taken by these rulers and that impacted the empire was decentralization. Alright. Now, of course, it became important for the empire to be divided. Okay, divided into two administration. Okay, one was in the west and one was in the east. But this division was not good. We already know that Constantine realized that the eastern part was stronger and the western part was weakening. So it divided its empire into two sections, and now it moved its capital to Constantinople. It built its new capital there. But this decentralization also did not help bring solutions to the already existing problems in the empire. Okay. Now, Constantine made the fateful decision to seek stability and cohesion through cooperation with Christianity. Now, Constantine also used religion to strengthen its empire, and it adopted Christianity for that purpose. Okay? Now, Christianity became a religion that was tolerated in the empire now. Okay, in 1313 AD, Constantine, in his Edict of Milan, guaranteed complete freedom of worship to Christians. It also gave complete freedom to worship for the Christians, to the Christians in 313 AD. About the end of the 4th century, the once despised and persecuted religion became the sole faith of the Roman Empire. So by the end of the 4th century AD or 400 AD, Christianity became the legal faith of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now after that, the power of the emperor came to be considered to be driven from the gods, to be derived from the gods rather than delegated by citizens. Now what was the idea? Now it was understood that the emperors were given powers not by the ability of the people to select them, but by the gods themselves. Okay, the gods gave them power to become the emperor. Okay, so now the emperor with the god-like power became unapproachable. It could not be approached by the people anymore. Okay, now the emperor came to be dressed in gold embroidered robe of purple silk. So luxurious robes were worn by the emperor to denote, to identify himself as God himself, okay, who was unapproachable by the common people. Now all subjects now had to prostrate, were required to prostrate themselves. They had to treat him like God, bow down on him, worship him, okay, and privileges were given to only few people, okay, only few officers who could kiss the border or touch the emperor's robe. Otherwise, no one could do that, okay. Now we already know that successors like Constantine and Diocletian tried to stop the decline of the Roman Empire, tried to stop the economic decline of the empire. But we know that these efforts only were for temporary period. It did not last long. Okay, so in the beginning of 406 AD, the West Roman emperors were powerless to prevent the permanent large-scale invasions of Franks, Burgundians, Visigoths, and Vandals in Gaul, Spain, and America, nor could the ultimate indignity of the sack by barbarians in 410 AD and again in 455 AD. So because now of the decentralization of the empire and how the capital moved to Constantinople, the West became even more weak, and because of its weakness, it was invaded, attacked by the tribes, the Germanic tribes. And the Germanic tribes were also successful in sacking Rome. Okay. So all these, the invasion of the the invasion by the Germanic tribes on the western part of the empire, this has considered to be one of the main causes of the decline of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now let's look at the social structure. Let's look at who were powerful members of the society and who were not. Okay, so for that, let's look at the social structure of the empire. Now, Tacitus, who was the historian of that period, a historian, okay, he tells us that the social structures were divided among the senators, okay, the leading members of the equestrian class, the horseman class, respectable sections of the people attached to the great house, lower class addicted to the circus and theater, and finally the slaves. So these were some of the different groups, social groups that were present or existed in the Roman Empire. Okay. In the early 3rd century AD, the Senate had approximately 1,000 members, of whom about half came from Italian families. So in the 3rd century AD, half of the Senate members came from Italian families. Okay. In the early part of the 4th century, the senators and knights, they had merged together to form the aristocracy or the Senate. So earlier the Senate were only those who came from the aristocratic families. But now, in the 4th century AD, the senators and the knights who were brave commanders in the military services, they were unified together to form the group of administrators or the Senate. Okay. Now, this late aristocracy was very wealthy, but in many ways less powerful than the purely military high officers. Now, this made the Senate less powerful than before. Okay, the middle class people, they consisted of military and civil officers. So civil officers and some of the military officers came from the middle class. Okay, and prosperous merchants and farmers, wealthy merchants, rich farmers also formed the middle class. Okay, Tacitus says that it was chiefly government service that depended upon the state for their subsistence. Below the middle class, there was a mass of lower class. So after the middle class, there was lower class. These were collectively called humiliores. They comprised of the ruler force, the peasants, the farmers, the poor peasants, and they were employed permanently on large estates of the rich, wealthy officers and also the mining establishments. Okay, the migrant workers also were part of the laborers of this lower class section of the society. Okay, so these were some of the social groups present in the empire that consisted of the social structure of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now it is said that the aristocracy based in the city of Rome drew annual income of 4,000 pounds of gold from their estates besides the produce they consumed directly. Now the aristocrats or the aristocracy in Rome, in the Roman Empire, they were extremely wealthy. Their annual salary amounted to 4,000 pounds of gold. And apart from this, they also had huge tracts of land from there they got produce, okay, crops. Now, the monetary system of the late empire, when the Spanish silver mines were exhausted and the government ran out of sufficient stocks of metals to support a stable coinage in silver, Emperor Constantine founded the new monetary system based on gold. Now, because of the exhaustion or the decline or the destruction of the Spanish silver mines, Constantine now made gold as the new monetary system. Now gold became the new money. Okay. And large number of new coins now came in circulation throughout the empire. Now the Roman bureaucracy or the Senate members, the officers of the Roman Empire, they were extremely wealthy because they drew their salary in gold. Okay, and after they got the salary and as they were extremely rich, they used their money in buying lands, in buying more and more lands. And in these lands, the laborers worked, the working class, the lower classes worked. Okay, now the system of judiciary, the administration, they were all corrupted. The officers, the administrators were corrupt. Okay. Now the government intervened frequently to curb the corruption. The government did make a huge effort to remove or to prevent this corruption. Okay. But it did not stop the entire corruption. Okay, the Roman state was an authoritarian regime. It was a state. It was a kind of empire where the ruler gained absolute power to control over its territory and the people living within that territory. Now the government did not tolerate dissent, okay, disagreements, did not tolerate any protest, any dissent from the people. And whenever people protested or spoke against the emperor or the government, it resorted to violence. They met with violence, okay. So a Roman law emerged in the 4th century AD, and this acted as a check to those emperors who tried to use their all power to control and to also eradicate the dissent from the people. Okay. Now with this law, now the emperors were not free to do whatever they liked. Okay, now the laws ensured civil liberty, civil rights of the people. Now people enjoyed their rights. Okay, the emperor earlier could do anything they want. They could kill the people if they disliked them, if they did not agree with them. But now the Roman emperors, after the introduction of Roman law in the 4th century, could not do that any longer. So we know that over time, after Constantine and his successors, the Roman Empire came to decline. Okay, the downfall of the Roman Empire occurred. Now let us look at some of the causes of the Roman Empire, some of the causes of the decline of the Roman Empire, mostly the Western Roman Empire, because we know that the Eastern Roman Empire continued to exist for another 1000 years. Okay. Now, one of the first causes was the attack from the German barbarians in the western part of the territory, right? So a French historian remarks that Roman civilization did not die a natural death, but it was murdered, meaning that somebody from outside caused the death, murdered the Roman Empire. Okay, that means the main cause was these outsiders who invaded the western part of the Roman Empire. Now, this may be true, but not entirely. Okay, we cannot say that this was the only cause of the downfall of the Roman Empire. Okay, the next cause, according to an American historian, though war was the apparent cause of death, the organic disease of the empire was economic. Now, another American historian remarks or tells us that although the Roman Empire was attacked by its enemies, which led to the decline of the Western Roman Empire, but the main cause was something that took place within the empire. So it was organic disease of the empire. Okay, so that was the economic activities. The decline of the economic activities led to the decline of the Western Roman Empire. Okay, so the Roman Empire suffered from low productivity. Okay, this was the result of a failure to advance technology. There was no improvement in technology which could be used in agriculture. Because of that, the productivity was very low. Okay, and that kept on decreasing. So after the Neolithic age, okay, which had produced important inventions such as metallurgy, the plow, the wheel, the sail, and the solar calendar, there were no other innovations that took place in the Roman Empire. Okay. Now, the third cause is also similar to the second cause, which is that there was no advancement in the technological sphere. Okay, and it was this decline or failure to improve the technology was because of the institution of slavery. So the third cause was the institution of slavery. Now, institution of slavery became an integral part of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now the slaves were bought by the rulers, by the officers, by the wealthy merchants and wealthy people. Okay, they were treated as wild beasts. Okay, they were hunted down if they tried to escape. Okay, so it was believed that in Roman Empire, while some were born to rule others, the others were born to be ruled. So that kind of idea spread or existed in Roman Empire, because of which the institution of slavery was made possible. Okay. So this institution of slavery, it deprived the improvement on traditional operation of his or her craft. Okay, so because of people being taken as slaves, they could not use their skill for doing some work that they were good at. Okay, so the masters also did not need any technological improvements, because they had slaves available for doing everything, whatever they needed. So if the Roman emperors, officers, if they wanted any work to be done, they had slaves available for that work. If they wanted their house to be cleaned, they had slaves. If they wanted their boats to be made, they had slaves. If they wanted their fields to be their fields to be worked, their crops to be cultivated, they had slaves available. So because of how slaves were used for doing everything for them, they did not feel the need for advancing technologies. They did not feel the need for improving technologies. Okay, so because of this, there was no advancement in technologies or technological sphere. Okay. And because of slavery, because most of the people were taken as slaves, now the slaves had nothing. Okay, the slaves could not purchase food. They could not do anything on their own. All right. So because of that, the internal economic market also declined. Okay, because most of the people who were taken as slaves, if they were not taken as slaves, they could no matter how much money they earned, how small the amount was, but they could have their purchasing power and purchase, and the market would flourish. The economy would maybe improve little bit. But because most of them were taken as slaves, now there were less people who participated in the economic activity of the market. So because of this, there was economic decline. Now, fourth cause was that even in the expansion of the empire, it met with limitations. Okay, and that limitation was because of the lack of technological development in communication. So because they had no technology or no improvement in technology, they could not build proper communications. They could not build roads. They did not have equipment to build roads. They did not build good ships. Right? So because of that, they could not expand out of Europe. They could not expand to other areas of the world. So just like China, they could extend as far, just as far, and after that they could not expand. Okay, so because of that, their frontiers, their boundaries were fixed. Okay, and it also gradually began to shrink, to reduce. All right, so this was one of the main reasons. Now another reason was that now with the huge or vast territory of the empire, its bureaucracy, its officials also increased. Okay, so the size of the bureaucracy increased during the expansion. Now, with the bureaucracy, with the army, with the other officers, and its increment in number, its increase in number, that meant that the emperor now had to have money to pay all of them. Okay, so now the emperor started to have not enough money to pay all of them. Because of that, there was inflation. Okay, there was inflation. Now, because of that inflation, the coins became worthless. And now the traders, because there was no coin, right, there was no money, they now moved back to the old tradition of barter system. They did not use money, but they exchanged their goods to trade. Okay. So this also led to decrease in the supply of slaves because there was inflation, which means there was no money, and this also led to the decline in the transport, in the acquirement of labor sources and other resources required by the empire. Okay. So as a result of this, the villages now started to become more and more self-sufficient because they could not depend on the industrial cities. They could not depend on the large cities. All right. So because of this led to economic disintegration of the empire. So this led to the cause of the empire as well. Okay. Now, this economic decentralization led to or was accompanied by political decentralization. So, political decentralization was another important cause of the decline of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now, with the decline of the trade, with the decline of the revenue, with the revenue decreasing day by day, now the imperial structure or the emperor could no longer hold its vast empire. Okay, so its control over the vast territory now began to crumble, began to shake. Okay, so what it did was now it started to divide the structure. It started to divide the empire so that it becomes easier to control small portions of the empire rather than the vast empire. Okay. Now these we have already seen in case of Diocletian and Constantine, that these of course helped in solving the problem, saving the empire for about 50 years. But after that, it could not sustain. Okay. And the empire finally declined. Alright. Now, of all these causes, the main cause of the decline of the Roman Empire was because the economy of the West was less advanced and weaker. So one of the things that we have to understand that the decentralization of the empire happened due to many reasons, right? It could not take control of the entire vast empire. But another main reason was that the western part of the empire was weak because the economy of this area was less advanced. Okay. Now the agriculture in this area was not productive. Okay, like that in the eastern part of the empire. Okay, the grain harvest in Italy was an average not more than 4 times the sowing, but the rich soils of Central Europe, had yet to wait medieval technologies advances for effective exploitation of natural resources. Likewise, industry in the West was relatively recent origin and generally lagged behind than in East. Thus, although the whole Roman Empire was wrecked by the organic disease, the western part, being the least robust, was the first to fall. The eastern part survived to live for another 1,000 years. So what this last cause is saying is that the West was weaker. We know that, right? So it was the West which was taken control by the Germanic tribes and which saw the decline of the Roman Empire. But one of the main causes for that is that the West was weak. The West was weak because the resources, the agricultural produce of this area was very less compared to the East. The East had fertile land. The productivity was very much more than the West. Okay, the industries that developed in the West was was not good enough. Okay, but the industries that were developing in the East, they were advanced. Okay, they were more advanced than the West. So because of these reasons, the West became easier as it became weaker to fall first. Okay, the East survived because the East was robust. The East had more productivity. Alright, so this was one of the main reasons which led to the fall of the Roman Empire in the western part. Alright, so these 7 points summarizes the causes that led to the downfall of the Roman Empire. Now let us look at what has Roman Empire and the Roman emperors left for us to read and understand about the Roman Empire. What kind of society did the Roman Empire or Roman emperors create during that time? What was their culture? What kind of laws were introduced? So we are going to look at that. Okay, architecture, social forms, different categories in the society, etc. Now, although we learned about the fall of the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire did leave a very rich legacy. The legacy meaning it had a huge impact. It influenced the society. It influenced the political administration of the empire. It influenced the way people lived during that period, as well as after the Roman emperors were replaced by other emperors, their cultures and traditions continued, the language continued. Okay, so that rich legacy, was left behind despite the fall and decline of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now, one of the most clear legacy which they have left behind is of course the material remains. Okay, like for example the architecture, the buildings, what they created during their time. All right, so we see the amphitheaters created by them, right? like stadiums, alright, where certain events and sports would take place and people would sit around that field and watch the game, alright. Arenas were created or built, temples were built, aqueducts were created or built, roads and bridges were also built. So this is one of the materials that have been built, that these are one of the structures that have been built by the Roman Empire, and many of them even today they exist and we can see them, alright. So of course that shows the legacy left behind by the Roman emperors, alright. Now apart from that, of course, the languages, okay, the languages that the empire left, that is also very important, okay. So the languages that was spoken in the Roman Empire, which included northern part of Europe, Mediterranean region, and East or Central Asia as well. Okay, so the languages that were spoken, okay, that is also the languages that were developed in these areas. That is also the legacy of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now, Roman law is another legacy that the Romans left. Okay, so that is another legacy that has been left by the Romans, and these the Roman laws which were introduced by the Roman emperors for the Roman Empire, that influenced the legal systems, okay, that influence the policies, the rules that were made in other countries as well, in other countries of Europe and America, and there are countries which still have some of the laws that were introduced or formed because of the influence of the Roman laws, okay. So that is also the impact of the Roman Empire and its law, okay, legal systems. Now another legacy left behind by the Roman Empire is of course the religion, okay, the religious structure, the religious traditions, alright. So one of that religious structure and religious tradition which the Romans have left behind is the Roman Catholic Church or the Christianity. Alright, so that is also an important legacy of the Roman Empire. Alright, finally, another important legacy is the Pax Romana. Now, what is Pax Romana? That is a peace, a period of peace that was brought and introduced into the Roman Empire. Okay, so this peace and prosperity, okay, which was introduced by the Roman emperors for the Roman Empire, this of course left the legacy in the Roman Empire, but it influenced other countries as well. Okay, so they also adopted same kind of policies to maintain or establish peace in their respective empires or kingdoms. All right. And of course, some of the emperors like Augustus, they influenced others in Europe, others in neighboring countries to become like them, to become a despot like them and have the same kind of ambition, okay, have the same kind of imagination to become an emperor and rule over such a vast territory of an empire. Okay, so such legacies and inspirations and influences were left behind by the Roman Empire, not only in the area which were under the control of the Roman emperors, but in other parts of Europe as well as in other parts of the world as well. All right.